Hey guys, it's Eric. Today I'm going to be answering a question that someone once asked me. Why do stomas shrink? So this question probably expands to why does your stoma change its size? Because some people might notice from week to week or month to month that their stoma isn't quite fitting the same size hole that they're normally used to cutting out. And this could be especially frustrating if you're using pre-cut wafers because you're going to have to adjust them after you've purchased them, and that can be pretty frustrating. So to start, right out of surgery, your stoma is going to be pretty swollen, and your stoma will be swollen for probably about 4 to 6 weeks. Now, there are quite a few factors that might change that number, but generally speaking, in about a month's time is when you should notice that your stoma is leveling out at a certain size. Although, like for me, for example, even 3.5 years later, I still find that I'm measuring my stoma every time I do an appliance change because it changes by several millimeters, and that might be enough to cause skin irritation if I'm not cutting it correctly. Now, for some people who are either gaining weight or losing a lot of weight after surgery, you might notice that your stoma size is definitely changing. Now, again, that might only be by a few millimeters here and there, and that might be a gradual change over months or even years, but that could also be a reason why it's happening. Now, some people might notice their stoma changing size right before their eyes, like magic. For the most part, it's just a cool thing to look at, and it's just a matter of your peristalsis doing its thing. And what peristalsis is basically, as your food moves through your digestive tract, your intestines start to make these waves and contract in ways to help push it out, hopefully exit it out into your toilet. You'll notice your stoma doing it because it's part of your intestine, whether it's your colon or your small bowel. It all does the same motion and it all ends up in the same exit point. Now, for the most part, that isn't something to be too concerned about. However, if you're like me, having a stoma that retracts or changes size at an alarming rate could indicate either a blockage, or in some cases, if it's completely come out, that could indicate a prolapse. Now, for the most part, these should be looked at by medical professionals. I know in my case, when I have that retracting stoma, I'm generally safe to assume that it is a blockage because I have had a history of noticing that every single time I have either a partial blockage or in some cases a full blockage. But I know from my own experience that if it gets to a certain point where there's other symptoms involved, then I will get a medical professional involved. However, I always recommend talking to your stoma nurse, talking to a surgeon if you have to, just to let them know that you have noticed these changes and let them reassure you that there's nothing really serious going on there. Now, there's not really much you can do about this. Your stoma's gonna do what it wants to do. However, I do recommend measuring your wafer every single time. Make sure that it's still fitting your stoma. So you'll notice when you grab a box of wafers, for the most part, most manufacturers tend to include this. You'll get a cutting guide, and it has all these circles and funny shapes on them. That's to measure your stoma, and you want to do that if you find that your stoma is changing a lot. For people who are wearing moldable wafers, and that's the type of wafer that you can fit to the shape of your stoma, that's not so much of an issue because you're going to be shaping it regardless and you don't have to measure anything. But if you're ordering pre-cut wafers and you're noticing that your stoma is changing sizes a lot and it's getting kind of frustrating to manage all that, try switching over to a cut to fit and see how that works for you. So I hope that helps, guys. It's just a very simple question, hopefully with a reasonable answer. I hope you've learned something today. Stay tuned for the next video. Take care.